Alright, huge news. A lot of news surrounding the Totally Not Mark situation. Mostly good. However, we do have one pretty catastrophic revelation within this saga, as well as one that I'm just gonna call frustrating. Alright, TLDR if you're unaware, in December 2021, an YouTuber Totally Not Mark had around 150 videos claimed by Toei Animation. Mostly Dragon Ball and One Piece content, which are the series that Toei animates. And I've made 2 videos on this before, so if you want to know more about the exact situation, then go and check those out. But this is an incredibly important update, because after a much needed hiatus, Mark and his team have returned to YouTube. I hope they had a well-earned break, because if anyone deserves it, it's probably them. But Mark was eventually contacted by someone quote-unquote high up at YouTube, who remains anonymous, but they need a name, so we're gonna call them Fred. But what this says to me is that person is likely even higher than the partner managers, which will also become clear shortly by the sheer power that Fred wields. But the first piece of important news is, and this is the catastrophic one, through this contact, Mark learned that originally Toei did not issue 150 content ID claims. Originally, they issued 150 copyright takedowns. And there is like a Grand Canyon's worth of difference between those two actions. A content ID claim allows the rights holder to either block the video or adopt its revenue. It's pretty devastating if you're doing YouTube as a career, because if, say, more than half of your library gets content ID claimed, then that's your revenue stream, well, at the very least cut in half, but probably worse than that. The good news is, though, content ID claims don't result in copyright strikes. However, takedown claims do, and this is what Toei originally wanted. They issued 150 copyright takedown notices, which, if successful, would have resulted in Mark receiving 150 copyright strikes. And for some context here, if a YouTuber ever receives 3 copyright strikes at the same time, the channel just gets deleted, no questions asked. And not only that, but all channels associated with that channel's AdSense account as well. So for example, if Grand Line Review ever got 3 copyright strikes, then not only would that channel be taken down, but so would New World Review and even this channel, Dude in a Room. Why is it that way? I don't know. I've spoken to my partner manager before about this, and all she ever says to me is, that's just how it is, Liam. And more on my communication with her later, because that's the very frustrating thing about this situation. However, this is where I do need to offer YouTube full credit, because instead of just accepting those 150 takedown notices, they went, hey, Toei, are you sure you want to do this? According to US law, you need to consider the fair use of these videos. Have you done that, Toei? Essentially, more or less asking Toei to produce legal documents showing that Mark's work did not comply with fair use. And it may have been entirely possible for Toei to do just that. They could have gone to court in Japan, and due to the fact that fair use doesn't exist in that country, I imagine it would have been very easy to prove. So whatever proof that was needed would have probably been granted. However, that involves screwing around with the legal system, which is expensive in terms of both time and money, and we like both of those things. So naturally, the Toei team in charge of action said, well, we cannot be bothered to do that. So instead, they took a step down and manually issued 150 content ID claims. Remember when we said we valued time and money? Well, Toei paid an employee money, and that employee used their time to manually claim 150 videos, which is just astounding, because when asked quite blatantly by YouTube to comply with not even international law, we're not even there yet, but their own law, comply with their own law, Toei outright refused and just took this incredibly petty path to enforce their IP. And again, potentially they would have very easily gotten away with this if they just made use of the Japanese legal system. But instead of playing by any rules, even their own, they circumvented YouTube's request and just used the lesser system to silence Mark instead. Which is why this news is kind of catastrophic, because it shows that Toei's intentions were far worse than initially portrayed. Before, they were just issuing content ID claims, taking down videos, hindering revenue, but not seriously threatening Mark's career. But behind the scenes, that is exactly what they were doing. Whether they understood their actions or not, and let's be real, they probably don't, as we'll see shortly, and they probably don't care to, but whether they understood this or not, they were pushing for Mark to be completely wiped off YouTube. And once that happens, it is not at all a simple task to get back on, because the AdSense account associated with the channel gets frozen or banned or blacklisted or whatever they do to it. Thankfully, I haven't experienced it yet. And there is a big problem in that each person can only have one AdSense account. So it becomes a huge endeavor, even if you can recover your audience on another channel. And legit, thank the Lord of crap that YouTube did step in here and demand that Toei at least provide some sort of legal basis for what they were attempting. However, at the same time, just imagine all of the smaller creators that have been wiped off the platform by this practice. The amount of voices that have been snuffed out unjustly must be insane. Back to Mark though, this is quite extraordinary because I've never heard of anything like this happening before. But his YouTube contact, Fred, I think we called him, then went into talks with Toei. Well, sort of. His contact through YouTube America spoke to YouTube Japan, who spoke to Toei, which that's still a pretty amazing endeavor, but unfortunately nothing came of it. And it's more than clear at this stage that Toei has no intention from learning from this experience or even expressing the desire to. Now, what's the problem with this? After my last couple of videos, I got a lot of comments saying something along the lines of, it's Toei's right to do this. It's their IP and a Japanese company should not be held to the American legal system. I believe one commenter even called me a colonizer. And just to make this clear, yes, Toei is a Japanese company. However, they are a Japanese company that distribute their product in a globalized environment. And when you sell your product in a foreign country, generally your product is subject to that country's law. I mean, not generally actually, like all the time. So let's reverse the example. Let's say that I had an Australian business selling, what do we sell? Like wool and opals, something along those lines. But business is going well and we are expanding and opening up a store in Japan, or distributing the product to a store in Japan, I should say. Now, because I am an Australian company, does that mean that I get to ignore the local Japanese law when selling my products in their country? I'm gonna go ahead and say that argument probably wouldn't work out too well for me. And it's the same with non-physical products. Dragon Ball and One Piece are digital media distributed all over the world, and therefore that media is subject to a whole slew of other laws that are not Japan specific, such as the fair use system which the vast swath of the Western world has implemented. And that brings us to the solution that Mark has now landed on. After failing to get through to Toei in any way, shape or form, Mark's videos have now been blocked from Japan, meaning that if Toei wants to pursue further action against his videos, they now need to go through a different country's legal system. Because yes, according to Japanese law, Toei have every right to enforce whatever they want regarding their IP in Japan. When it comes to blocking the videos everywhere else, well, in theory, those change for each and every country. Toei cannot just apply Japanese law globally when they sell their product in a foreign marketplace. And it's frustrating, so incredibly frustrating, because it's a very simple solution. Block the videos in Japan and, we should be all good. The issue is, and this is where I'm going to complain about YouTube for a bit more, creators don't have access to that power by default. The ability does exist, however, in order to gain access to it, you need to join an MCN, which stands for multi-channel network. And a bit of honesty here, by and large, MCNs are scams. They used to be very important when monetization was originally introduced on YouTube, especially with gaming channels, because the only way that most of them could get monetized would be to join through an MCN. However, these days they serve very little purpose other than to just leech income off creators. That's the simple truth of it. And when I say leech, I mean that they will take anywhere from 10 to 30% of your income in exchange for the very, very little they provide. Not a great deal. And yeah, there are some decent networks out there, but most are just outright scams at this stage that will force you into long contracts and do absolutely nothing in exchange for the income that they scrape off you. However, one useful ability they still have is geo-blocking, and why? If the feature already exists on the platform, why do I have to join an MCN to gain access to it? Why is YouTube deliberately holding this back? And to be fair, there are a couple of potential reasons. One is the more reasonable outlook that allowing creators to just block whatever wherever they want would be quite beneficial to content piracy. Let's say for example, I was pirating Japanese media from Australia, then it would be a very handy thing to block Japan from my activities. So there is that, but there's also the more cynical view that YouTube has intrinsic beneficial business relations with MCNs. So as a result, they have access to powers and benefits that not even my partner manager can reach for me, which really pisses me off because it leaves a lot of people in completely defenseless positions against an assault from a company like Toei. And the fact that it takes such an extreme scenario like the Totally Not Mark situation to come up for it to even be considered an option is wild. Because remember, something Mark absolutely had on his side was the power of making an incredible amount of noise. So much noise that this issue escalated to discussions on channels like Philip DeFranco and PewDiePie. It has to get to the very top of the YouTube world to be heard, which means that anyone who can't do that, you simply don't stand a chance. Me, for example, I have a pretty damn big channel in terms of raw numbers, bigger than Totally Not Mark, but I would not be able to make make anywhere near the amount of noise that he did if that situation were to happen to Grand Line Review. Mark has a lot of contacts and a lot of clout on Twitter that I just don't even come close to, so I do fear for the future of that channel and therefore the future of all channels, including this channel. Because if nothing else, this situation has shown us that Toei just doesn't care. They have no interest in participating in the legal system of the countries where they directly make money, nor any regard for the individuals whose lives they could potentially be destroying. Like, I felt I was pretty harsh on Toei in the initial round of videos on this topic, but if anything, I don't think I was harsh enough. Their intentions were just to go full scorched earth. Now, on the flip side, I do think I was too harsh on YouTube because they did erect that defensive barrier that stopped Mark from just losing his channel in the snap of a finger. And that is slightly comforting because I would hope that they would do the same for any of us if we were to come under such an assault. I mean, that's what I would like to think. You can never be sure. And this certainly won't make me sleep any easier at night, especially because even if we're defended against a takedown, the YouTube system still allows natural abuse of the Content ID tool. And it's one of those situations where even if you do have evidence that a company is abusing this tool, and we clearly do now with Totally Not Mark, who has been vindicated and his videos are now back up, but why is Toei still being trusted with this tool? They did the wrong thing. They did objectively the wrong thing. Surely there should be some kind of punishment, like a ban or a restriction on them engaging with Content ID. Because, and here is one of the most patronizing things that happens on this platform. If a creator gets a copyright strike, then YouTube forwards that creator to this delightful thing called YouTube Copyright School. Part of which is a video where, no joke, they have a custom episode of Happy Tree Friends break down what copyright is, and they treat you like some sort of dumbass child. Like, now children, look what happens to the cartoon squirrel when he uploads someone else's content. It's infuriating. It's legitimately infuriating. You know, that we get subjected to this patronizing bullshit when the company who made the claim against us probably did so with complete disregard to the system that we are now forced to watch a cartoon squirrel to learn about. But nothing ever happens to the companies who abuse the system, even when it is proven that's what they did. Why aren't we at the very least forcing every member of the Toei legal department to sit down and watch the patronizing video about the cartoon squirrel? And again, I just want to reiterate, because this can't be said enough. If Toei had sought Japanese legal documentation that asserted their rights within Japan, YouTube likely would have just bowed down and allowed a man's life to be ruined. So next time, if Toei can be bothered, maybe they'll be more prepared. Maybe when they strike Grand Line Review, they'll have the right paperwork, at which point YouTube will do nothing because it does not get involved in anything remotely resembling a legal kerfuffle. On the bright side though, Mark's video is now back up, so we've sort of won for now. This is definitely a we won the battle but not the war kind of scenario though.